Hello everyone, today's subject is the Peugeot 206, a car so common that people forget that it had quite a career. And today I will go over the whole story of this car. Almost. First, we need to talk about the predecessor, the Peugeot 205. When the 205 came out, Peugeot was in a tricky financial situation, and in fact, this car saved them from this situation. The 205 was really appreciated for multiple reasons. They were really reliable, nice looking, and they had a GTI version, which was a direct rival to the Golf GTI. It was a huge success with more than 5 million 205 sold. And the 205 was also in Group B and doing very well with the Turbo 16, which looks extremely cool. Especially on the road-going version. It was doing very well, however, there was an issue. The car is getting old. At first, Peugeot didn't want to make a car after the 205. There was already the 106 and the 306, but at one point Peugeot decided to make the 206. So on the 7th April 1994, the project is launched. Peugeot knew that they couldn't make the 206 a trash can on wheels, especially after the 205. They planned to reuse engines from other cars with the TU engines and XU engines. However, the XU ones were scrapped. And some magazines talked about a 1.2 liter turbo engine that could end up in the 206, but thank God it never happened. It gives me bad memories of a certain Peugeot engine. Also, the Peugeot 206 was almost called the 207 because the Peugeot 06 started in 1991, and by the time it would be released, it would be a bit outdated. They still went with the name 206. However, directly after the release of the 206, there was a car named the 607 that came out, which means it was the end of cars of Peugeot that ends with 06. The 607 is a pretty nice car, however, it marks the beginning of the downfall of Peugeot. It's like Peugeot said, wow, the 206, what a great car. Now let's make everything worse. I would love to continue about how much I hate modern day Peugeot, but it's not the time for that. We're speaking about the 206, their last great car. For the design, they threw away the old dated 80s design with squares everywhere. They decided to go with something more round. The person in charge of the design of the 206 is the same one that designed the 205. His name is Gérard Velter, and he did a lot of designs for Peugeot. He designed some of the best looking Peugeots. Now let's go back to the 206. They did multiple design studies to settle on a good design. They did a first drawing to have a general idea of what they want, and then they did a full-size design study. And you can see it was a design study, because it looks awful, but some design elements were kept on the final version. For example, the interior is extremely close actually to the final version. Of course, it is not exactly the same, but you can see the general idea. They did multiple design studies. They changed the headlights, they changed the bumper, they changed many things till they arrived to the final version. One of the design studies kinda looked like an Opel Corsa C mixed with a Peugeot. I don't know why, but I see the Opel Corsa C. In 1994, the media started taking interest into the new Peugeot, and they made illustrations to show what the new Peugeot could look like. One of the drawings actually looks like a Peugeot 106 or 306. The Peugeot was actually tested on a Belgian test track. To create the 206, Peugeot actually invested 6.3 billion French francs into it, which is very close to €1 billion. Peugeot made sure that the 206 was safe to drive, as European regulations were getting pretty strict around this. And in fact, the 206 is pretty safe, so they did a good job on that. At the beginning, Peugeot wanted to release the car in 1997, however, it was pushed back to 1998. And in September of 1998, the first 206s were sold. When the 206 came out, it had 4 engines, 3 petrol engines and 1 diesel engine. The least powerful engine is the 1.1 liter petrol engine, as it only makes 60 horsepower. The sport version at the release was called the 206 XS, which made only 90 horsepower. But for less than a ton, it's good enough. And the last engine is a 1.4 liter engine that makes 75 horsepower. All of those engines are actually the same type of engine called TU engines. TU engines are well known for their reliability. In fact, they are so reliable it is ridiculous. For example, my Peugeot 306 has a TU3 engine. It showed signs of not going well at all. We left it for a few days and it was back to normal. The engine was shutting itself down a few days prior and then after it was fine. I am convinced that those engines run on black magic. And the diesel engine is the famous 1.9D. It is very reliable, however, it is extremely slow. Even the 1.1 liter petrol engine feels faster than this. The reason it is extremely slow is because it is a diesel engine that doesn't have a turbo. And when diesel engines don't have a turbo, they feel insanely slow. It's impressive. Speaking of slow, the opposite of slow came out in 1999 for the 206. So you remember that the 206 when it came out, it had the XS version, which is 90 horsepower. They released the S16 version. The S16 is also called the GTI in other countries. It was quite the upgrade compared to the previous Ford version. Instead of giving an XU engine, Peugeot decided to give a brand new engine, the EW engine. It is a 2 liter 16-valve engine, which makes 137 horsepower, and it is naturally aspirated, because here we hate turbos. All my homies hate turbos. The engine combined with a good chassis makes it very good. It's a pretty nice hot hatch. However, a real version was released also. It was based off the S16, however it had weird bumpers. It is called the 206 GT, and only 4,000 were produced. But why Peugeot made a weird version of the 206 with weird bumpers? Well, it is for WRC homologation purposes, because the base model 206 is slightly too small, because in WRC your car needs to be at least 4 meters long. However, the 206 is 3.8 meters long, so Peugeot decided to give the 206 bigger bumpers, which led to this weird version. Those bumpers may look weird, but the final version of the 206 WRC is honestly pretty. The decals look awesome, and I really love that spoiler. Now you may wonder, how did the 206 do in WRC? It won 3 times the WRC in 2000, 2011 and 2002. And it won with the pilot Marcus Grönholm and his co-pilot Timo Rotienen. I don't know how to pronounce that name. Richard Burns also drove the car, however he never finished first with it. I said the Peugeot 206 was meant to have XU engines, but it never happened. Well, actually, the 206 WRC has an XU engine, the XU10 G4, which has a turbo. Well, it is slightly modified, especially compared to the road version. The most powerful road legal version of the XU10 G4 is 167 horsepower, and the engine in the 206 WRC is 325 horsepower. Speaking of rally, the 206 is actually a pretty popular car to do a rally build on it, because it is simple, reliable and cheap. And some of the engines actually has a lot of potential in tuning. I heard that TU5 engines can tank a lot of abuse. Now let's get to the 2000s. In 1998, Peugeot showed the 2.0 Art concept car, which is a hot-top convertible version of the 206, designed by Gérard Velter. In 2000, Peugeot revealed the production version of the concept, called the 206 Coupé Cabriolet, or CC for short. They reused a lot of things from the base model 206. The main changes are the body and the chassis. They reinforced the chassis so that the car doesn't crumble when you have an accident and the roof is down. The only part of the body that really didn't change was the face. When it came out, it had the S16 engine, however, there is a new engine. You see the 90 horsepower engine of the XS? Well, they added 8 more valves. And boom! 16 valves. It went from 90 horsepower to 110 horsepower. The XS version also got the upgrade, and the 8-valve version disappeared. When the 206cc came out, it was a huge success. People really loved it. At the time, convertibles were considered more expensive cars, so a cheap convertible was really appreciated. Then came 2001. A big scary thing happened. Multiplexing. This scary word means that the electric components communicate differently. To explain very simply what it is multiple information going through one channel as one complex signal, then it gets back to being multiple signals. It is something to be aware of, since some electric components cannot work on non-multiplexed 206. Also, there is also a new engine, a 1.4 liter diesel engine called the DB4. I hate this engine so much. It's unreal. 2002 is a special year. It is the release of the Space Wagon, also simply called the 206 SW. It looks pretty cool. The rear headlights kinda look like a Volvo, but you can open the trunk window. What is funny about the SW version that you could have all the engines of a regular 206, even the S16 version. Then came 2003. The 206 got a facelift. Well, it isn't a Hyundai Coupe type of facelift. In fact, it's pretty subtle, like the front grille pattern that changed, or the rear headlights, or the Peugeot logo on the trunk that slightly changed. There is a belief that only facelifted 206s are multiplexed, but it is false. Some pre-facelift 206s are multiplexed. But 2003 means the 206 gets two new engines. The first engine is called the ET3G4, which is basically a 16-valve TU3 engine. And the second engine is the DV6. I will erase all the engines that exist called DV6. I will destroy all of them. There will be no traces in history of a DV6 engine. They don't deserve to be remembered. Those engines are the bane of my existence. This year was also the year a special 206 came out, and it has a new special version of an engine. Peugeot released the best road version of the 206, the 206 RC, also called the GTI 180. The RC has the same chassis as the S16, however, Peugeot reinforced the rear axle. Because there is a disease on the 206, is that the rear axle dies pretty quickly. Like after 160,000 kilometers, the thing is dead and you have to change it. Which is a bit annoying. And since the Peugeot 206 RC is the best version of the 206, Peugeot had the idea to fix this. But it is not the most important thing on the 206 RC. What is important is the engine. Peugeot took the engine of the S16 and decided to tune it a bit. The 2-liter engine went from 137 horsepower to 180 horsepower, and they didn't use a turbo, and the car weighs 1.1 ton. All of that combined makes it a very good car, and it is also very fun to drive. Well, I mean, all the Peugeot 206 are fun to drive. They all tend to be a bit playful, due to a major thing. It is due to the chassis, because Peugeot and Citroën's cars tend to slide a lot from the rear. You call that dangerous, I call that very fun. All was going well with the 206. However, 2006 came. The 206 RC, S16 and SW were stopped being produced, and in 2009 they made a facelift for the 206. They called it the 206 Plus, and my god, it looks awful! How do you manage to make something that ugly after making something that beautiful? And no, they didn't bring back the sport version of the 206. The only thing that they reworked was the DV4 that lost 2 horsepower. All the Peugeots of that era looks like the 206 mixed with a blobfish, and then, in 2013, they stopped making the 206 Plus. Putting it down, that's how the 206 ends. Or does it? Good news, people! The 206 and its inbred nephew are still produced in Iran since 2001. ECO manages the production of the 206, and you can buy one for only 5,000 euros. In Iran, they also have a version that no one had in Europe, the 206 sedan. Basically, the 206 had an SR version like the 306, so it is still produced, just like the Peugeot 405. For me, the Peugeot 206 was the peak of Peugeot before the downfall awful. Every time a new Peugeot came out after the 206, it got worse and worse. Now Peugeot makes horrible 3 cylinders that has the capacity to self-destruct. It seems like Peugeot lost interest in making cars with an actual personality. And what hurts more is that I am a Peugeot fan. I really love Peugeots, but all the cars they make today are awful. If you want a good brand new hot hatch, you should get a i20N. At least they are more reliable than the Peugeots. Or just buy a Peugeot 206 S16. Anyway, this is the end of the video. I really wanted to talk about the 206 because I really love that car. And it is not because it is my car. In fact, my car is a Peugeot 306. What is funny is that the USA never got the Peugeot 206 because Peugeot gave up. Even Renault gave up. Too bad the Americans didn't get to enjoy the 206. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to check out those wheels. Goodbye!